There's an entire generation that raised itself. They came home to empty houses, learned to survive without supervision, built the digital world but refused to live in it publicly. They're your coworkers who never complain, your parents who seem emotionally unreachable, the people holding everything together while expecting nothing in return. Generation X born between 1965 and 1980. And their psychology might be the most misunderstood of any living generation. We dissect millennials endlessly, analyze Gen Z like they're a new species, debate boomers at every family dinner. But Gen X, they exist in the middle, barely mentioned, almost invisible. And that invisibility, it's not accidental, it's intentional, it's protective. It's the result of a childhood that taught them a very specific lesson: the less people know about you, the safer you are. Picture this: it's 1978, you're 8 years old, you get off the school bus and walk up to an empty house. Both parents are working, no cell phone to check in, no Ring camera, no way for anyone to know if you're okay. You let yourself in with the key hanging around your neck, make yourself a snack, do your homework alone, and wait. By 1984, approximately 7 million children between ages 5 and 13 were regularly unsupervised after school. An entire generation learning independence not as a choice, but as a requirement. That empty house did more than make them self-reliant. It taught them something darker: you can't always count on someone being there. When their parents finally came home, there was no gentle debriefing about feelings. The rules were clear and consequences were immediate. Step out of line and you paid for it. No discussion, no therapy sessions, no processing emotions together. Psychologists call this a high-contingency environment, where actions and outcomes are directly linked without buffer time. Your brain learns to predict consequences in real time, to think 3 steps ahead, to never make a mistake you can't fix yourself. This is why Gen X approaches problems differently than any other generation. They don't ask for help, they don't post about struggles, they just quietly fix things while everyone else is still discussing the problem. But here's what nobody talks about: that self-reliance came at a cost. The trust wound. Gen X grew up watching the social contract break in real time. Their parents talked about stability, then divorced at unprecedented rates throughout the 70s and 80s. They watched people give everything to companies, then get pink-slipped without warning during mass layoffs. They were told, work hard, follow the rules, and life will work out. Then the rules changed, repeatedly, without warning. So they developed what researchers call defensive pessimism, not cynicism exactly, but a learned expectation that good things won't last. They hope for the best while preparing for the worst, not because they're negative, but because that's what survival required. This shows up in fascinating ways today. They're less likely to trust institutions, less likely to believe in corporate loyalty, more likely to have multiple income streams, not because they're entrepreneurial by nature, but because they learned early that nothing is permanent. The privacy instinct. Gen X has a fundamentally different relationship with visibility than younger generations. They grew up in the last era when privacy was default. When you made a mistake, maybe 5 people knew. There were no phones to record it, no internet to immortalize it, just awkward memories that faded with time. The idea of broadcasting your life to strangers doesn't feel liberating to them. It feels dangerous, exposing, unnecessary. This isn't technophobia. They built the internet, after all. It's a deeply ingrained belief formed in childhood. The less ammunition you give the world, the less it can use against you. Irony as armor. Gen X turned irony into a psychological defense mechanism. Crack a joke before it hurts. Keep things at arm's length. Laugh it off before someone can use it as a weapon. This wasn't just a cultural aesthetic, it was emotional survival. They grew up in the shadow of the Cold War. Teachers discussed nuclear annihilation like it was weather. Duck-and-cover drills where children practiced hiding under desks as if that would save them from atomic bombs. When adults insist the world might end, but also tell you not to worry about it, you learn to hold contradictory realities simultaneously. You learn to maintain emotional distance, just in case. The competence obsession. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, Gen X developed a distinctive relationship with work. They don't talk about it, don't post about it, they just do it. This work ethic was forged through jobs that seem almost archaic now. Paper routes at 5 a.m., bagging groceries, fast food registers where you calculated change in your head when the machine broke. These weren't resume builders. They were raw initiations into adult responsibility. A 12-year-old could be trusted to deliver news to an entire neighborhood, alone, in the dark, without supervision. They watched their parents' generation get destroyed by corporate restructuring, so they never believed in company loyalty, but they're fiercely loyal to their own competence. They can't control whether they'll get laid off, but they can control whether they're the most valuable person in the room when layoffs happen. The authority problem. Gen X has a complicated relationship with authority. They respect competence, not titles. If you've earned your position through actual skill, they'll follow you anywhere. If you're just someone with a fancy job title who doesn't know what you're doing, they have zero patience. This comes from watching incompetent authority figures make catastrophic decisions their entire childhood. Watergate, Iran-Contra, the fumbled AIDS crisis, adults lying on television, institutions failing publicly. They learned early, question everything, especially people who demand blind obedience. The collaboration paradox. Here's the contradiction at the core of Gen X psychology. They're simultaneously the most independent generation and the most quietly collaborative. They'll never ask for help. They've been solving problems alone since they were 8. But if you need help, they'll show up, without drama, without posting about it, without expecting recognition. This comes from forming tight bonds with friends out of necessity when parents were absent. Those friendships became survival networks, and the unspoken rule was, you show up when it matters, no questions asked. So what does all this produce? A generation that's incredibly capable in crisis, but struggles to ask for support during ordinary stress. Research in the Journal of Adult Development shows Gen Xers report significantly lower levels of seeking social support during difficult periods. Not because they don't have people they could ask, but because asking feels like admitting defeat. This self-reliance borders on pathology. They can handle emergencies with frightening competence, but that capability often masks an inability to be vulnerable, to admit they're struggling, to let others carry some of the weight. They've been economically traumatized repeatedly. The youngest Gen Xers graduated college into the dot-com bubble burst. The oldest were hitting their stride when the 2008 financial crisis hit. They learned to expect the rug to be pulled out. So they plan for disaster, save obsessively, diversify income, never fully trust that good times will last. And now they're watching their kids grow up in a completely different world, one with helicopter parents, constant supervision, social media documenting everything. They gave their kids the attention they never had, but sometimes they worry they've made them too soft, too dependent, too visible. Because in the Gen X worldview, being visible means being vulnerable. But here's what makes Gen X remarkable. They learned to fix things, not just objects themselves. Before the internet, knowledge had weight. Gen X spent hours in libraries hunting through card catalogs for a single book that might contain an answer. Information had a physical cost. It required effort and time. Cognitive psychologists call this deeper encoding. When information requires effort to obtain, it becomes more permanently integrated into memory. They flipped bikes upside down and figured out chain tension with greasy hands. They opened broken TVs and traced circuits with a screwdriver. They learned that with enough patience and resourcefulness, you could master the physical world. This built something younger generations often lack, the confidence that comes from solving hard problems alone. Not because it's ideal, not because community and support aren't valuable, but because sometimes the answer doesn't exist yet and you have to build it yourself. Generation X might be the last generation that truly understands what it means to be alone with your thoughts. To be bored without reaching for a device, to solve problems without Googling the answer, to sit in uncertainty without immediate validation from strangers online. They're not better than other generations, just different, shaped by a unique moment in history when the old world was dying and the new one hadn't quite been born. They're the bridge generation. And bridges don't get much attention. They're just there, doing the work, holding things together, expecting nothing in return. Maybe that's the most Gen X thing of all, not caring if anyone notices. But here's what younger generations can learn from them. Self-reliance doesn't mean isolation. It means having the skills to survive alone while choosing to connect with others from a place of strength, not desperation. Privacy isn't paranoia. It's recognizing that not everything needs to be shared, performed, or validated publicly. Competence is currency, titles fade, brands change, but the ability to actually do the thing to fix it, build it, solve it, that lasts. Question authority but respect expertise. The two aren't the same. Plan for disaster while hoping for the best. Defensive pessimism isn't weakness, it's preparation. And perhaps most importantly, you don't need to announce everything you're doing to prove it has value. The work speaks for itself. Gen X is watching quietly as the world debates which generation has it hardest. They're not joining that conversation. They're too busy holding the infrastructure together, raising kids, managing crises, solving problems nobody else notices until they're already fixed. They learned young that complaining changes nothing, that the world doesn't care about your feelings, that survival means adapting quickly and expecting little. That might sound bleak, but there's something deeply powerful in it. They don't need recognition to keep going. They don't need validation to know their worth. They don't need an audience to do what needs to be done. In a world increasingly obsessed with visibility, with metrics, with proof of existence through digital engagement, Gen X remains comfortable in the shadows. Not because they're hiding, because they understand something fundamental. The most important work is often the work nobody sees. If you're Gen X, you already know this. You've known it since you were 8 years old, standing in that empty house, figuring it out alone. And if you're from another generation, there's something here worth learning. Not to become emotionally distant, not to refuse help, but to build the kind of quiet competence that doesn't need applause to sustain itself. To be the bridge, to do the work, to expect nothing. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what the world needs right now. If this resonated with you, the next video explores why some people are ambitious but never start, and the psychology behind staying stuck at the starting line. It might be exactly what you need to hear.